Hello everyone, and welcome to this Video Some Frontier video. Now, last year, some of you might remember that I did a wee Christmas guide on what to buy the vintage computer lover, either in your friend list or in your family. Now, this year, I thought I would do something probably a wee bit more constructive. I have been asked a few questions, based around technological ideas for folks' Christmas, and I thought that this year it might be a good idea for me to actually cobble together a wee PowerPoint, basically just to run through some of the wee tips, tricks, and maybe some do's and some don'ts when buying a technological gift for a loved one this Christmas. This presentation, by the way, is brought to you in association with J. Wakefield Computers, enabling through computers. You can now find us on 12 John Street, or telephone is now 07. The number is basically 07547 094247. Okay, enough of that. www.jwakefieldcomputers.co.uk is the web address. So this presentation is not necessarily one of those what should you buy guides, although there probably will be a couple of tips in here about things that you probably should buy to go with certain other things that you may or may not want to buy. If you're looking for advice on what to buy, there are going to be lots of internet reviews, and certainly in the coming weeks computer magazines will actually start rolling them out. If I do get enough questions about buying particular items, then I may have to take it upon myself to do a presentation. However, I would like to bring to mind that a lot of the professional magazines and internet sites do usually have the money to get hold of every single device on, well, not necessarily every single device, but a lot of devices out on the market, test them properly, and be able to come up with a cogent conclusion. Whereas basically, for me, I select devices based on what I think is best, and I obviously do try and advise as certain things that I do know about, obviously because it's my job to know about them. But when testing the latest greatest devices with a view to having it poking out of someone's stocking this Christmas morning, I'm probably not the best qualified. Computer Active is usually a good source. I subscribe to that. Anyway, what this presentation is basically it offers you tips to help you during the process of actually buying the technology. Now, I am aware that the time is currently 23 minutes past 11 on November the 13th, which is Tuesday, 2012. However, if you go on the high street, you'll basically be fooled into thinking that Christmas is basically just a couple of days away, the way that they've all decorated and are playing Christmas music. And in any case, Christmas shopping does take quite an amount of time, especially if you're ordering stuff on the internet. In fact, if you're planning on doing your Christmas shopping online this year, now's probably the best time to do it. Anyway, we're going to be covering buying a new computer, the do's and don'ts, basically, you know, what you should do, what maybe you shouldn't do, and what to expect, and what to do if everything basically goes to hell in a handcart. Being J. Wakefield Computers, a lot of you will know, either from the article in the Press and Journal about the company, or basically because you've used our services before, that J. Wakefield Computers does a lot of work keeping used machines up and running for as long as possible. So I will actually be publishing some tips in this video on what to do when buying a used PC. We're also going to be looking at buying a vintage computer, because yes, some of my friends have actually approached me about that very thing. The idea of getting an old machine, probably from the 80s or 90s, for your Christmas, and there are a few tips I can impart with you on that one. And there probably will be some tips on items that you should buy as kind of complimentary presents to go along with the device that you're planning to buy. Also, we're going to have a look at software, because, well, let's be honest, computers really aren't that useful without it. And because of the way the computer industry appears to be going, we're going to have to take a look at smartphones and tablets. And please do not accuse me of being an Apple fanboy here. I do have a section about the iPad, because unfortunately it does seem to be the tablet that a lot of people are buying, especially those in the market for a tablet for someone who has got special educational needs or some other form of disability. It just seems that the iPad seems to be the choice of tablet for people with disabilities. So that is why I'm dedicating a whole slide on the iPad. And this gives us a nice link, because I will be talking at length about buying any piece of technology for someone with disabilities, what to do, how to get it set up, and basically what is the best technology to actually buy for someone with disabilities, because that is something I do know something about. Anyway, let's crack on. Buying a new computer. Now, to be honest, I would say that out of all the technological buys that you could actually get for someone for their Christmas, a new computer would probably be one of the most risky. It's expensive to buy a new computer, and there is a good chance you could get the wrong one. And if we're honest, if you do get the wrong one, a lot of retailers are very, very funny about taking computers back if it's not the right one. In fact, a lot of retailers just simply won't do it. I've had experience of this myself. I had a computer missold to me saying it would be fine for a university degree. It actually turns out it wasn't. The machine should have been okay. It was a Sony Vaio, had lots of bloatware on it, but unfortunately, Sony being Sony, they will not actually warranty the machine unless you have their install of Windows. If you put your own install on, they'll not help you. Unfortunately, their install is so loaded down with bloatware that this machine took 10 minutes to start up. And this was a brand new out of the box machine. So just bear that in mind. Make sure you're getting the right machine. In fact, personally, I mean, I've not put this on the slide, but personally, if someone has actually said, that they want a new machine, or you're going to get a new machine for them, probably best not to have this one as a Christmas present surprise, it's probably best to actually be sensible about it. Take them computer shopping. Try out a few. Places like Curry's, I think they've gotten a bit better, but when I was buying, when I was going with my then, well, basically she was my girlfriend at the time, she isn't anymore, we basically went out to buy her a new computer. All she could really afford was something in the £400 price bracket. So basically we went into Curry's, and her last computer, before it had been defeated by a box of pens falling on it, and literally that is what happened, it wasn't broken, smashed or maimed in any way, I actually asked the shop assistant, look, can we, shut down the computer and boot it up to see how long it takes? And the guy actually turned round and said, well, I don't know what he was trying to do, because he actually turned round and said, well, no, you can't. And then he went on to say, in the same sentence practically, that if we didn't like the machine, we had no recourse, we could not return it. So basically he was basically he was doing what you shouldn't do when selling something. He was showing that he was not willing to bend in any way to make sure that we got the right service. Personally, he was actually, I can understand them not wanting to take the machine back in a way, sort of, but to not even let us boot up the machine beforehand, no. But unfortunately, my ex went ahead and bought the machine. I would have just walked out of the shop. You'll be pleased to know that Curry's has now actually shut down. More than they deserved. So, when buying a computer, try and make sure you go to the right shop, if you can. It may be a wee bit more expensive, but actually I would recommend John Lewis, because they offer nothing but fantastic customer services. I've never had any problem with them. They've always been really very friendly, and if I've had any problems, I've dealt with it courteously, efficiently, and basically they weren't acting like it was a huge burden on their part. Anyway, so you've got to find out the requirements for what the person wants. If they're after a web browsing machine, you could maybe look at netbooks. If they need something with a bigger screen, then you look at that. Try not to get the cheapest machine possible. I mean, I know it's easy for me to say that, if you are working on a budget, but personally, there's a couple of tips I can offer. Go and look at business class machines. Instead of looking at Dell Inspirons, look at Dell Vostros. They are really very good. Instead of looking at Acer Aspires, look at Acer Travelmates. And I'm really sorry to have to do this, but forget Hewlett-Packard altogether. The number of Hewlett-Packards I've had that have been beyond economical repair is just, it just takes a mick, and I never like signing a machine off for being beyond economical repair. But even when I was trying to buy second-hand parts, it would have cost, the bill would have run into hundreds of pounds. It just, at the end of the day, it is your choice, but it's my advice is avoid Hewlett-Packard for computers. I hate to have to do this, I really do, because once upon a time I absolutely loved everything that came out of that staple, because it was all good stuff. Our school had HP Vectras, they were brilliant, but anyway. Windows 8. Should you? Well, that all depends. If you're looking for a computer with a touch screen, I would say that definitely you probably should look at Windows 8. If you're looking at Windows 8 for an upgrade to Windows 7, again, if you have a touchscreen, it could be a good idea. If you don't have a touchscreen though, personally my recommendation is that you stick with Windows 7. Windows 8 does actually require a wee bit of relearning, and there's certain things that are, well, basically it's not as efficient under Windows 8 as it is under Windows 7. For example, it takes a few more clicks to actually shut Windows 8 down. You're constantly having to jump back and forward between the new interface and desktop. Certainly if you're wanting to start desktop apps, I mean, yes, you could put them all on the desktop, but that would just make everything look cluttered and untidy. Basically what Microsoft have tried to do, instead of doing what I would love and put a desktop operating system in a tablet, which would be ace, they are trying to bring tablet and smartphone desktops to the actual desktop computer itself. Personally, I don't think it's going to work. However, like I said, if you have a touchscreen, Windows 8 is good for you. But going back to the system requirements, there are different types of machines for what people want to do. If you're a hardcore gamer, I would say forget the laptop, probably go with the desktop. Yes, you can get laptops that do game, but just remember this: laptops offer limited upgradability options, so be aware that you are stuck with a lot of what the machine comes with. And talking about limited upgradability, you may or may not have seen the new Apple Macs. We've got the Retina MacBook Pro 13-inch, we've got the Retina MacBook Pro 15-inch, both now sporting absolutely no optical drive at all. Yes, you can get an external one, but do bear that in mind that you're going to be adding on £80 to the cost, pretty much. It could be a wee bit cheaper now, but still, for a machine that's over £1,000, that is not a cost that I would recommend anyone should ever have to bear. Considering when other manufacturers have made machines without optical drives in the chassis, they've usually put one in the box, which is awful nice. Not necessarily with netbooks, I'm meaning more the ultra mobile laptops, kind of full size thingies. Desktops, even Apple desktops, basically not only have to get rid of the optical drive, they are non-user upgradable. Unless, of course, you know what you're doing, but even if you did, you will void your warranty. You cannot replace anything, not even the RAM. And as a former Apple Mac user myself, someone who absolutely loved the OS and still do, I'm going to be honest, I mean, this is my personal opinion, yours may differ, but I don't think I will be buying a new Mac again. I think that the outgoing iMac i3 that I had is going to be the newest iMac, the newest Mac that I will own, unless Apple bucks up their ideas. So, I mean, yes, you can get I mean, you might be thinking, but Jay, I'm buying this computer now. It's got everything on it. Well, think about this. Windows expands over time with all the updates. Machines that would run Windows XP at a blistering fast speed in 2003, if you install Windows XP on them now and update them, as in you have to update them to make sure you're safe, these machines will drag. I mean, literally drag along. I mean, I've seen it. You have to be able to make upgrades. Memory usually will sort you out, but not being able to upgrade the RAM is just no. I really don't like that. Anyway, so let's say you've brought your machine home. I would say that you should test this out before Christmas Day. Now, I remember PC Guide would actually run a guide on how to do that. If you're buying for the kids, make sure you do it when they're to bed and asleep. Otherwise, you'll never hear the end of it until Christmas. We're getting a new computer. Because I know I would have been that annoying, pesky kid. But then again, we got the Compact Presario in May. What you do is you get the machine out, you have a look in the included content list. You usually get one of those with the machine, what's in the box. Make sure you have everything. If you've got a laptop, what you will usually get is the laptop body. If the battery is removable, you'll get that. If it's non-removable, it will be in the laptop body itself. You will get the plug. You'll actually get the power brick, and you may or may not get some paperwork. You generally will get warranty information. Sometimes you might even get recovery discs, although that is basically the exception now rather than the norm. Generally, you don't get pre-included recovery discs. You generally have to make your own. If you're buying a desktop, generally you'll get the actual computer, you'll get a power supply, a mouse and a keyboard. Again, you'll get a wee bit of paper saying where's my included media, which explains to you how to make it. And you may or may not get a monitor. Check whether a monitor is included in the price. You may have to pay extra for one of those. If you don't have all the required parts, you can always bundle the machine back up, take it back to the shop, and they will actually have no choice but to sort you out on that one. Power the machine up. Don't be afraid to do that. Seriously, do it. Because powering the machine up now, as opposed to waiting till Christmas morning to find out that it doesn't work, I mean, that is the sort of thing that could quite easily ruin someone's Christmas. I'm not being melodramatic, it does. This sort of thing does ruin people's Christmases. So check that it works, and as an added bonus, you can maybe set it up, install all the required Windows updates, so that, you know, on Christmas Day, when you try to shut it down to have Christmas dinner, you're not looking at a screen saying, please wait while Windows installs one of about 127 updates. Or constantly having the computer restarting while you're trying to chat to your mates on MSN talking about how ace Christmas is, or trying to shift all those unwanted gifts on eBay. Good idea to set the machine up now, and if you've got any software with it, load that onto it. So basically, it's all in working order. So what do you do if it doesn't work? Well, if it's an actual hardware fault with the machine, you can actually just take it back. I mean, literally, you can do that. If you're buying for a Christmas present, check what the return policy is. Because if you're buying now, and they will only accept returns within about 30 days, then by the time December the 25th rolls around, today being November the 13th, you're going to be a wee bit scunnered. However, like I said, if you check the machine as you buy it, then really you should have no issues with being able to return it and then get a good one before Christmas morning. Machines usually do come with a 1 year's warranty. It's, you know, basically buying a computer at Christmas time usually should be the same as buying a computer at any other time of year. The only difference being, generally you'll probably want to put it away until, you know, Christmas Day, whereas if you're buying it any other time of year, you'll get it home and then basically just rip all the boxes open and then just kind of pull it out like some excited child on Christmas. Okay, so that's what to do when buying a new machine. So what do you do when buying a used computer? Well, I would say all of the above. Plus, there are a few things that you need to bear in mind when buying a used machine. Find out whether the user, that should say seller, but find out whether the seller of this machine offers any kind of a warranty. Generally, used machines do not come with any kind of warranty, and they are sold as seen. If you can actually go and have a look at the machine, have a look at it running, I would do so. And now I'm going to sound a wee bit like Quentin Wilson on Old Top Gear talking about how to buy a lovely used car. Check for any nasty rattles from the exhaust, because that could set you back a pretty little bundle. No, I could never be as funny as Quentin Wilson. However, there are a few things that you can actually check out, and yes, some of them are knocking sounds. When powering up, it'd be a good idea to check for any messages that come up that hint that the clock battery has lost its charge. Usually you'll find the computer complaining about it's forgotten all of its CMOS settings and has returned to its default values. Forgetting the time may seem trivial, however, a lot of internet cookies, as in internet, basically pieces of information that are stored on your computer about how you use an internet site to make browsing easier, they usually are based on time. Web certificates for secure connections, again, they usually have a valid to and valid from time, and if your computer's clock is wrong, then these obviously are going to throw up numerous error messages. And the most important one is antivirus software. It will think it's up to date when in fact it isn't, and you will be left vulnerable to viruses. Now, on a desktop computer, replacing the clock battery is a very simple job. Clock batteries themselves cost a couple of quid, and if you're handy with a screwdriver, it literally takes a few seconds, and then just it's a case of going into the BIOS and making sure everything's set up. Again, if you're not confident with this sort of thing, J. Wakefield computers will actually fit a new CMOS battery for a charge and set the computer up so it's working on the correct time. Laptop computers, I hate to say, are a wee bit harder. They have become easier because you can get CMOS batteries that can be unplugged, but laptop computers, they do generally tend to be a wee bit trickier to actually fit CMOS batteries in them, and in some cases they can actually be soldered onto the board, and because CMOS batteries for laptops are usually bespoke, might not be as easy as you think to get one, and will be invariably a couple of quid more expensive. Okay, that only probably brings it up to something like £5, but still, you know, it's something that you want to be aware of. Another thing to check on your computer is ticking sounds from the hard disk drive, something like a that will signify imminent failure. So basically, you know, if that is the case, if you're wanting to actually upgrade the hard disk, I would haggle for money off. If not, walk away. Also, check the temperature. You can usually do this within the CMOS by pressing the delete button, or F1 or F2, as the computer starts, and then going to something like H/W information or hardware monitor. Usually a good running temperature in centigrades will be about probably mid 40s to 50s. I mean, that usually is on something like a quad-core processor. If you're just doing basic web browsing tasks on your computer, and the processor is ticking over at about 60 degrees or above, something is wrong. Could be as simple as just needing to dust out the machine, or it could be that the heatsink either needs the thermal compound reapplying, or it could be that the heatsink itself is on the way out. Again, quite a cheap, easy job to sort out, but again, you've got to ask yourself, how long has the machine been running like that for? Again, I would test it out, and just see how good or otherwise it is. If the computer doesn't always start first time around, that could signal an imminent either power supply or motherboard failure. This can quite easily be tested using a power supply tester, which you can pick up at Maplin's. If you're on a desktop computer, if you're on a laptop computer, if it's power supply or motherboard failure, I would say walk away, because these can be expensive and time consuming jobs to fix. As a rule of thumb, desktop computers are generally easier to fix and easier to get parts for than laptop computers are. Laptop computers are generally bespoke. They're not necessarily meant to be user serviceable. Usually you'll be able to upgrade the RAM and the hard disk under warranty, and that's about it. Otherwise, it is very tricky to get into laptop computers to be able to work on things like the motherboard. As for laptop computers, other faults that you might want to look out for: pixels on the screen, different coloured lines. You might get a bright line at the bottom. You could end up with a line going across the screen, or you could just end up with a few bright coloured dots. Now, if you have one bright coloured dot, that is usually a dead pixel. 1 or 2 aren't too bad, but I think if you get any more than, say, 3, 4, 5, then that could indicate an imminent screen failure. Screens can be replaced, but this could be expensive and you might want to look elsewhere. You may find that the graphics starts displaying fuzzy things. If that happens, you start getting kind of fuzzy colours and something a wee bit psychedelic. That could signify an inverter failure, LCD or graphics card. Or if you switch on the computer and the fans spin up but there's nothing on the display, try connecting it to an external monitor if you can. If a picture comes up on that, it'll be a new screen. If nothing comes up at all, could be a new graphics card. And if it's a new graphics card, basically on laptops these are soldered into the motherboard. Generally you're looking either at an expensive job to get someone to solder an old one out and solder a new one in, or you're looking at a whole new motherboard, which would be more likely. As for optical drives or floppy drives, a rule of thumb is that moving components will generally wear out first. CD drives, floppy drives, I hate to say it, hard disk drives, fans, they will all be the first to go. Try running a CD. If you find that it takes an unusually long amount of time to seek and just doesn't even load the disk, or loads it and has errors, could be a couple of things. The laser lens could need cleaning. If after that it's still displaying the same sort of symptoms, you're going to need a new optical drive. Desktop computers, very easy to fix. Laptop computers, relatively easy to fix, although actually finding the right drive could be a problem. Laptop computers, you might also want to watch out for dead keys on the keyboard. Try every key out, and try the touchpad out, try the suppleness of the buttons. Generally you tend to find on older machines that the left mouse button will actually have sunk in a wee bit. If that's the case, ask the seller how old the machine is. If it's not too old and the mouse button's already starting to show an advanced stage of sinking, personally, I don't know. I mean, if it was me, I would probably look elsewhere. But if you're okay with the fact that the mouse pad could go, the mouse button could go. I mean, mouse pads on laptops are usually have the function where you can substitute left click for a tap. But personally, I mean, I would like the whole machine to be working. However, it's not something that you have to worry about the working of the machine. Okay, I've already covered that, and I've already covered trying out the machine before you buy. Right, something else that I've not mentioned as yet. You're probably going to have to do some extra work if you buy a used machine. A used machine will generally have been used. I mean, that's why they call them used machines. So you could end up with other people's data on them. Now, I know how tempting it is to troll through other people's data, but please do us all a favour and don't. If you're handy with using the computer, get yourself a copy of D-Band's Boot and Nuke. Secure erase the hard disk. I mean, yes, not only are you risking actually seeing people's private information, but what if there was something a wee bit questionable on that hard disk? You don't know, your kids could go into it, all sorts of trouble could happen. Secure erase the hard disk. Oh, and sellers, please do that, so that the buyer doesn't necessarily have to. If the seller has already actually secure erased his hard disk, or her hard disk, and has put on a new copy of Windows, that is all very well and good. Check that the copy of Windows used is legitimate, because it is actually a criminal offence to actually sell someone a counterfeit copy of Windows. Also, if you have to install Windows, you can actually do so if there's no recovery media, or if you can't access the recovery partition, which actually most modern computers have one of those. Usually you can borrow a Windows disk from a friend. That is perfectly legitimate to do so. However, borrowing their key isn't. Installing Windows using your own key is, but make sure you're actually using the version of Windows that is corresponding with your key. So if your key, for example, says Windows 7 Home Premium, you're not going to get anywhere with a Windows 7 Professional disk. If you get a Windows Vista machine, something that I will add, and you are not too keen on Vista, generally Vista machines are compatible with Windows 7. If you would like more information on upgrading from Vista to Windows 7, come and see me in the office. And if you're not too handy with having to do a full Windows reinstall, again, come and see me in the office. One thing to note, if you're buying machines on eBay, a lot of times sellers will generally avoid the whole hornet's nest of distributing private data, and they will take the hard disk out of the machine altogether. Unfortunately though, a lot of sellers usually like to think it's clever to remove the caddy along with the hard disk. So just be careful with that, because while some caddies are very easy to find, for example anything for a Dell Latitude of any sort, generally, some computers you're just not even going to get them for. I mean, I had a case where with a Sigma laptop. Actually, no, it was a Rock Zeno notebook, and the machine itself is working. I have a hard disk for it, but there is absolutely no way of me actually getting hold of a caddy. And I've tried, and I've tried, and tried, but to no avail. Like I say, if you're not comfortable reinstalling Windows or making any upgrades to the computer, go and see your local computer repair shop. If you're in Aberdeen, you just got lucky because your local repair computer shop is me. Okay, now here's a bit that I think I generally have the most fun with: buying a vintage computer. Basically, you want to listen to everything that I've said on the last two slides. So everything about checking the machine works, checking the requirements, and seeing if there's any kind of a warranty, checking the machine for faults. Faults will be more likely to occur with vintage machines, obviously, due to their age. So if you do buy a vintage machine, don't expect to have it for as long as you would expect to have a modern machine. Check that the machine will be able to run the software that you want. Now, if you're buying a vintage machine, you probably know this already, and you're probably looking at the computer screen going, Jay, I know this. I'm not expecting it to run Portal 2. I understand that you're not expecting the machine to run Portal 2. However, if you're planning to run something like one of the original test drive games, if you try and run it on anything, if you try and run, for example, the test drive game on anything above a 60 megahertz CPU, it's just going to go running too fast. The Lazy Game Reviews guy actually did a piece on that, basically showing off his 386 machine and his compact Pro Serio all-in-one 486 machine. Make sure that the machine is actually fast enough, or yes indeed slow enough, to run what you want to run. Make sure that you have the right peripherals to go with the machine. For example, older machines generally won't have USB ports. For machines of kind of the mid-90s upwards, you're going to be looking at the older PS2 style connections. Unfortunately, a lot of high street shops will not actually sell you PS2 mice and keyboards. However, you can get them on eBay. Also, you can get adapters to convert USB into PS2. Unfortunately though, this doesn't work for every device. I have a Microsoft BlueTrack mouse which is USB, and there is no way that I can convert it to PS2, which is a bit of a shame. I mean, yes, I can plug it into a PS2 converter, but it won't actually work. If you have a machine from the early 90s or the late 80s, well, the 80s in general, chances are it won't even use PS2. It'll use another standard for keyboards. It'll use DIL, or DIN, sorry, and it will probably use a serial mouse. Basically, your mouse will plug into a port like you would have plugged an old modem into. If you're an Apple, generally you'll use, if you're not using USB, Apple did drop legacy support a lot sooner. In fact, I would say probably about a decade sooner than what Windows did. But before USB, Apple had the ADB, the Apple Desktop Bus, and quite often you had SCSI. Also, make sure you have a VGA monitor. I understand nowadays everyone is moving to HDMI and to a lesser extent DVI, all very good standards. You can usually plug a DVI monitor into a VGA port by way of a converter. However, oh yes, and you can also plug HDMI into the same way. However, some monitors may not like the resolutions or refresh rates put out by older machines. So if you have the room and if you can get hold of one, get hold of an older screen. If not, you just kind of have to try and make do and mend as best you can with your current hardware. And here we go. And the reason I talk about screens not liking certain systems is because I've had experience with an Atari ST 520. I've tried connecting up to my trusty Samsung flat screen TV, and while I did eventually bully it into working, there was a wee bit of interference with the picture, and it turns out that newer TVs don't generally like the refresh rates put out by the older Atari computers. Also, as things go to digital, you may find that your TV is not able to receive an analog signal. So if you don't actually have computers that plug in over SCART, or you don't have bespoke monitors for them, you're having to use RF, make sure your TV can actually tune into an analog signal. That is especially important if you're buying older consoles, for example the Sega Master System or the Nintendo Entertainment System, known better as the NES. Now if you're buying an older laptop, again, like I said on the previous page, these are actually trickier to fix than desktop counterparts. However, you do have the advantage of them not taking up room, because one of these older computers, they do take up quite a lot of space. However, one thing to note, laptops at the time that I'm talking about buying, 80s, 90s, they were behind the desktop counterparts. I mean, properly. They could be seen to be, probably a couple of years or so behind the desktop counterparts. However, if you do have a machine with an active matrix display, there are games that it will be able to play. For example, the Toshiba 2130CS has a 486 DX 475 chip in it, and that can be used to play games from the mid-90s, and it does so really well, because quite surprisingly that screen has still got a lot of colour in it. So well done Toshiba. However, Toshiba were quite well known for, in the late 90s, actually choosing to use passive matrix displays. Now, just to actually tell you the difference, active matrix, in layman's terms, active matrix displays, you'll generally not see much ghosting. You probably will see a wee bit because, well, the display technology is a wee bit antiquated. But passive matrix displays, basically, looking at one of those is kind of like, well, I think the best real way to describe it, and I don't condone binge drinking when I say this, but the best way to describe it is kind of like looking through your eyes when drunk. Things don't seem to move as quickly as they should, and, well, on a passive matrix display you do get a lot of ghosting. So while laptops with passive matrix displays are good for word processing, things like that, for games where you've got a lot of fast moving screens, you've got one of two choices. A, plug it into an external monitor, or B, forget it. Okay, software. Buying software, again, is really quite tricky. what you need to do is ensure that you know exactly what you need the software to do. While you can often sweet talk shops into accepting refunds for unwanted hardware, on a very lucky day, generally, unless the software installation medium is damaged, you're not going to get refunded on that. And I think this is due to piracy concerns. I mean, what is to stop anyone taking a game home, copying it, and then putting it back? Well, product activation, I guess. Like I said though, if your software media was actually damaged on purchase, i.e. you've taken the disc and opened it only to find there's a big chunk out of it, and yes, it has happened, you are entitled to a refund. No ifs, no buts. Generally what I do is, if I can actually open up a case with software in it, I will do. I used to buy the latest Sims expansion packs, generally with my shopping, because that was a convenient thing to do. And to be able to do that, I would take the case to the checkout, and then some poor runner would have to run to the warehouse and get the disc. That was quite good, because that basically meant I could actually have a look at the disc as the runner was putting it in the case. And one time I did actually get a damaged disc, so the runner went back to the warehouse for another one for me. Oh, also, make sure that the computer you are planning to run the software on can actually run it before you purchase it. Software will generally have to have the system requirements written on the back of the box. And if you want to know your computer system requirements, well, I'm going to show you how to do it in Windows 7. Basically, if you click on the Start button, Windows 8 users view looked out here. Right click on the computer and then select Properties. And like I said, it's magic. Another way to do it, hold down the Windows key and press pause. And in this you'll actually see the processor type, the speed, and you'll also see things like the amount of RAM. You'll see something called rating. That is a Windows Experience Index. Some games have actually started giving that as a system requirement, i.e. you need a Windows Experience Index of 3.4 or above to be able to play this game. To check your graphics hardware, you're going to need to right click on the desktop, select Personalize, select Display, and select Adapter Properties, and then click on the Adapter tab, and that will tell you about your graphics adapter. I really don't know why it can't tell you about it in the System Properties. It would make more sense. Okay. Now if you say tablet to a lot of Scottish people, they will think that you're talking about a fudge type sweet whose predominant ingredient is sugar, and lots of sugar. Usually this is complemented with sugar, with a wee bit of sugar to add a wee bit of edge. So, if you talk to the rest of the world about tablets, they're going to think about the iPad for some reason. So, first things first, with any kind of mobile phone device, this has been this way for basically over the past 10 years, well, basically over 10, 15 years I would say, probably more like 14, but basically when mobile phones came into fashion, since then, since Christmas time, if you've needed to activate or register your SIM card, a lot of other people are going to be doing the same thing, so you could well be on hold for a long time. So just kind of bear that in mind. That aside, what would the person that you're buying a smartphone or a tablet want to be able to do with it? Well, Apple want you to buy an iOS device. The iPhone and the iPad, they are desirable. Not only that, they're extremely easy to use, and they do have the best accessibility options out of the box. However, you are limited to what Apple let you do, even down to the fact that you can't easily make custom ringtones from MP3s. It's not impossible, but it's not easy. And a lot of people will find it easier to simply buy these from iTunes. To be honest, I don't like that idea at all. Especially not considering that iOS devices are hideously and quite often prohibitively expensive. I mean, generally, if you're buying an iOS device on contract, you're quite often paying a few hundred, well, something like £200 up front. I mean, you could actually buy a phone offline for something like that. And I'm not even talking about communistical style basicness here. I'm talking about, you know, relatively decent phones that you can actually buy offline for not much more than a couple of £100. So, yes, get an iOS device if you want, but be aware that you literally are paying for Apple to take away a lot of your freedoms that you waited all your childhood until you were an adult to get. And Apple have went now. Basically, Apple have turned it all back around, and you're suddenly a child again, saying, you know, listening to some guy say, "No, you're going to do as we say, otherwise you'll be sent to bed without your dinner." Right. That said, I do very much like iOS. Android phones, more sensible option for a lot of people. They are a lot less restricted, and generally they're very cheap. In fact, I mean, I wouldn't recommend this because what you'd be getting is basically a bag of bolts for this. But you can own an Android phone from as little as £40. And tablets aren't that much more. Well, actually, they're quite a lot more than £40, but they are very competitively priced. Some will be priced the same as the iPad, but you'll get quite a bit more for it. If the user wants something basic, forget your Galaxy S3s, your HTC One, XV, ZV, Veloce, VT, Balboni editions. Have a look in the line, well, basically tablet wise. Take a look at things like the Amazon Kindle Fire, the Amazon Kindle HD, or even bespoke ones like Asus e-readers. Now, do be aware that with Android devices sold specifically as ebook readers, the manufacturer will have actually removed access to Google Play, which basically removes access to a lot of apps. Now, this can be actually installed into the device, but it's not actually the sort of thing that's the easiest thing to do. However, if all the user wants to do is browse the web and actually read ebooks, then that could be a viable solution. So, just as Windows 8 has come out to try and own the desktop, which I don't think it will, Windows Phone 8 has come out. And I'm going to be honest, that looks a lot more promising. Now, I was there when Windows Phone 7 came out. I was there counting down to the launch. And I was there with the rest of them, bloomin' disappointed when it came out. And even more disappointed when Mango was basically just a minor update and didn't fix anything. But Windows Phone 8, it seems that Nokia have finally had a chance to start having some say. I've been hearing stories about the fact that Bluetooth file transfer is going to be restored. The fact that you're going to be able to actually use your Windows Phone 8 device in something called data storage mode. Imagine that! Just like an Android. So Windows Phone 8, if you like smartphones of the old school, and if you want a really reliable phone, definitely check out something like the Nokia 920. Nokias have always been really reliable, so, you know, at the very least you will be getting a top-notch mobile phone that you know will have been made properly. Right, as promised, here's a slide all about the iPad. Like I say, a lot of people, then coming up next is a Harry Potter reference, so if you've not ever read Harry Potter, I'm very sorry about this. But a lot of people will completely disregard everything that I've just said, all about the Nokia and all about the different Android solutions, and that they will wander aimlessly towards the iPad, like some poor old fool who has just been obliviated, and then immediately has then been placed under the Imperious curse and is unable to lift it from themselves. They will literally go to the iPad in, you know, swarms. I know a lot of people who've got iPads. Basically, like I've said before, they are extremely accessible for those who have got disabilities. This is why I like iOS. And there's no denying it, some of the best apps out there are still only available on iOS. And some of the best apps out there are, well, there are some brilliant apps for the iPad for people with special educational needs, and the iPhone for that matter. Basically, if you have an iPhone already and you buy the iPad, what apps you have on your iPhone will download themselves to your iPad, and when you download something to your iPhone, that will also download to your iPad. Also, both devices will have access to the cloud, so all your documents will be saved. Photographs, you'll be able to sync them from one device to another without having to use a computer. Yes, it does take a lot of data, but if you like having all of your documents all around you, if you love the cloud, you'll love this. If you're wondering or not whether to save some money and go for the older iPad 2, do so. It's still as good as the new one with the Retina display. However, I never thought I would notice the Retina display, but to be honest, I've used the iPhone 4S, I've used the iPad 2, and I actually can't notice, and I'm visually impaired. But I mean, it's not such a noticeable thing that the iPad 2 becomes this unusable thing. Far from it. To be honest, you know, if you've only got a limited budget, you really want an iPad, the iPad 2 is a good way to go. Now, if you're wanting to use an iPad more as an e-reader than anything, and you take it out all over the place, you probably should consider the iPad mini. I've had a 7-inch tablet before, the Galaxy Tab, and let me tell you, it really is very ergonomic having a tablet that size. It's basically no bigger than a lot of books, and you can actually even hold it like a book, and it actually makes it easy to type. I mean, yes, I wouldn't expect to be able to type one-handed on it, but you can actually type on it two-handed, whereas I've found that with something with the screen size of an iPad, generally it's better to set it down and to type on it that way, rather than trying to type by stretching your thumbs across the screen. Now, I know a lot of people who are buying iPads for sons and daughters who may or may not have disabilities. Bear this in mind. I mean, you may have already thought of this, but some people will inadvertently forget. First thing you're going to do, you are going to need to realise that some apps will need installed on the iPad. An iPad without apps, yes, you can browse the net, but I mean, that's literally all you can do. That and text people, I guess. So you're going to want some apps on it. Don't put your credit card details in. Best way to do it for a child's iPad is to buy iTunes gift vouchers. That way they're not tempted to basically, just download an app, using your credit card. Basically they could end up downloading loads and then you've got to pay for it. It's, not the best thing in the world to happen. Whereas if you have an iTunes voucher, once they run out, they run out. And I guess it teaches them budgeting, so let's say you've got £15 worth of iTunes to spend, they then know how much you've got to spend on apps, yada yada yada. So now we actually move on to buying for someone with a disability. Now, this can be seen as more complicated than buying for people without disabilities. So, for example, a child with special educational needs might need hardware that is more durable. Now, iPads are well known for not really being able to stand up to punishment. However, there have been a lot of companies who have come out and tried to put a solution to the problem. So you can get reinforced cases. You can even get some that are army spec'd, and these can help protect your iPad. You can get a lot of accessibility gear, assistive technology stuff, from a website called inclusive.co.uk. Now, this site does have a major interest in iPads. If you're looking for something for the Google Nexus 7, keep looking. You might find someone somewhere who might be willing to sell you a reinforced army case for that, but not on this site. Choosing the right smartphone or tablet. Like I said, like I will keep on saying, iOS devices very accessible out of the box. However, that is not to say that they are the only choice. Android's talkback is a lot better than it was 2 years ago when I jumped on the Android bandwagon. And to be honest, I actually know of a person who is fully blind who uses talkback and uses it very well. They have no compromises, and basically this means that for someone who is totally blind, the iPhone is still there, but it is now a choice. It is one of more than one. You don't automatically need to buy the iPhone. Also, you do have things like big font changer and big launcher. Basically these will replace the default launcher and they will change the font size. Now, a word to the wise. Big font changer, it works really, really well, just as long as you're not using a bespoke launcher like, for example, HTC's Sense, because no font size changing application seems to work with that. It seems resistant. However, if you're using vanilla Android, it'll work perfectly fine. And even with Samsung's TouchWiz, it works perfectly fine with that as well. So if you're wanting an accessible phone, you're visually impaired, and you really don't fancy iOS, my bet is to try the Google Nexus 4. The Google Nexus range always comes with a stock build of Android, which obviously can be customized. If you don't like the sound of big font changer, Spare Parts Pro Plus, yes, I know it's the sort of thing that if you had it on your computer sounds like a Trojan horse, but trust me, this is basically TweakUI, if anyone remembers TweakUI. This is basically a TweakUI program for Android phones, and it's really quite good. But like I said, again, you can change the font size with that, but if you're using HTC Sense, it won't work. Some people have actually suggested that you root the phone and change the display's resolution. I'm gonna categorically say no, don't do that. If you change the resolution, yeah, sure, you might get big fonts, but you'll be sacrificing clarity, you could be sacrificing compatibility with certain apps, and your phone's interface could come over all British Leylandish and stop working altogether. Windows Phone 8, that is said to come with a magnifier, and Windows 8, if you're wanting a tablet, then Windows 8 I can definitely confirm does come with a magnifier. If you're buying a computer, to actually set your computer up, an actual desktop computer or laptop, could be a wee bit more expensive. Luckily Windows 7 and 8, like I said, do come with tools now. Mac OS comes with accessibility tools as well. They are really very good. And if you're a bit of a Linux junkie, then you can get tools for that as well. Compass Fusion for Ubuntu, that offers magnification, and it's really quite good as well. However, unfortunately on Windows, if you're, well, basically the best software out there does seem to still be the pricey options. And that website that I was talking about earlier, inclusive.org.uk, they've got a lot of alternative ways to input into your computer if you can't use a keyboard and mouse. These are frighteningly expensive. Like I say though, if you are wondering about assistive technology, go and talk to your local computer dealer. Like I said, places like Currys and PC World, they might not know everything there is to know about assistive technology. However, independent computer shops will probably know more. So for people in Aberdeen, Northeast Peripherals, they know quite a lot about assistive technology. Or, failing them, again, you can always come and see me, because this is something that I do know really quite well. So, in conclusion, first of all, here's a picture of the Windows Ease of Access Center. So, if you find that, yes, you find your computer mildly difficult to use, there might actually be something in the Windows Ease of Access Center that could help you. Windows' accessibility options, basically Windows Vista started with the Ease of Access Center, which was very good, very intuitive, and then Windows 7 continued on that by putting in a full screen magnifier, which was amazing. I couldn't believe my eyes when I did that. No pun intended. I mean, literally, I was just like a babbling wreck. Wanted Windows 8, well, I wanted Windows 7 now. Never mind that it was still in beta 1 stages. I wanted it then and there, like a spoiled child at Christmas, literally, because I knew it was going to be good. Anyway, so finally, in conclusion, what you need to do is ensure when you're buying computer hardware for someone's Christmas, you know exactly what they want and know what you're getting. You bring it home, you test it out. If it's a new computer you're getting for someone and you're not sure what they want but they are, take them with you. Don't surprise them on Christmas morning with the wrong computer that will only be used to sell itself on eBay on Christmas night to put the money towards getting the right computer. When shopping on the high street, it's always a good idea to ask for a gift receipt. Shops will give you one. Basically it means that if someone doesn't like something, again, you know, I have talked about the complications with software. If you ask for a gift receipt for most things, shops will actually accept those and they will happily refund the item. J. Wakefield Computers can and will advise and assist you with Christmas shopping advice and can help setting up computers that can be given as Christmas presents. And when the time comes, bearing in mind that the time of production is actually only November, it's actually now November the 14th, please have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And on that note, thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Sorry it was a longer one. Please subscribe and come back for more of my videos. Thank you for watching and see you in my next one.